Before we traverse the threshold separating reality from the ruins of time, let it be understood. This journey is a symphony of historical fiction. We are not merely recounting a tale, we are weaving a tapestry from the authentic threads of Civil War-era stratagems. This is an endeavor to illuminate the vibrant yet silent lives, souls, buried beneath the dust of chronicles, to honor the anonymous fortitude that once sculpted the destiny of a nation. Beneath the ethereal autumn mist of Portland, Maine, Sarah Mitchell entered a realm where time seemed to suspend its breath. Amidst the ancient relics of a Victorian estate, a singular artifact awakened the instincts of a historical decoder. This was no mere photograph. It was a fragmented reality from 1914, preserved within the silver emulsion of Hartwell Studios. The Patterson family appeared in solemn dignity, yet within that perceived perfection, Sarah discerned a fracture of anomaly. While the father stood as a monolith of the old era and the children bore faces of suppressed innocence, the mother became the epicenter of an enigma. Her hands did not rest in ritualistic ease. They curled, forming a small cocoon around an anonymous white entity. Margaret Whitmore, the gatekeeper of fading memories, could not illuminate the darkness shrouding their identity. Under the magnifying lens, the truth began to bleed through the pixels, a concealed parchment, a silent message entrusted to eternity right before the world's unsuspecting eyes. The year 1914 was more than a digit. It was the frontier between a fragile peace and a global tempest. Sarah realized that the scrap of paper could be an incantation of help, a sacred vow, or a secret capable of upending the hierarchy of an elite lineage. As Dr. James Reed joined the Odyssey, curiosity transmuted into a pursuit of lost souls. They were confronting a riddle deliberately left behind by that woman, a haunting presence cradled in her palm, defying the decay of time to recount a tale of dread and hope on the eve of the Great War. Whatever entity lies dormant within the woman's manual cocoon carries a genetic code of history. Dr. James Reed, possessing the vision of a chronological decoder, understood that within the stillness of Hartwell Studios in 1914, no coincidence was permitted to exist. Every fold of fabric, every gaze was a deliberate arrangement. The imprint of Theodore Hartwell was more than a brand. It was the key to a portal leading into the elite circles of old Boston, where secrets were shrouded in velvet and rigid etiquette. Sarah Mitchell ventured into the domain of paper souls at the Massachusetts Historical Society. Amidst an atmosphere condensed by the dust of ages and the silence of bookshelves, she discovered the presence of the Patterson family. A handwritten entry from March 15, 1914, emerged like a monologue from a dreamscape. The address 145 Beacon Street was more than a coordinate. It was a symbol of power and profound solitude within the high society. The sum of 12. $50 purchased an eternal moment, yet it could not buy serenity for the mother's soul. As the shadows of hypotheses began to loom, Sarah realized she stood before a silent rebellion. Why, in a ritual honoring togetherness, must a mother use her own body to conceal a truth? The gravity of the mystery lay not just in the scrap of paper, but in the private anguish she strove to preserve for over a century. Every step Sarah took toward the Patterson lineage was a stride into the eye of a storm of suppressed emotions, where fortitude is often found within the crevices of trembling hands. If these vibrations from the Patterson family's past have resonated with your soul, please leave your mark by liking and subscribing. Each of your small actions serves as a candle, illuminating the obscured corners of history that Sarah and James are striving to decode. Do not forget to share your reflections in the comments below, for sometimes the truth is only revealed when we awaken the dormant memories together. Sarah's next destination was the Genealogy Research Room at the Boston Public Library, a sanctuary of souls defined by ciphers and scripts. Here the portrait of the Patterson lineage gradually emerged from the dust of the 1910 census. Thomas Patterson, a formidable textile merchant along with his wife Ellanar and two children, William and Catherine, once reigned atop the pinnacle of affluence. With the service of domestic staff and the empire of Patterson and Associates, they were not merely dealers of exquisite fabrics. They were the architects of opulence during Boston's Gilded Era. However, as Sarah leafed through the faded newsprints of 1914, the glamour began to splinter. The ink on the Boston Globe and Boston Herald acted as blades, severing a fragile piece. Just 5 days before the fateful portrait at Hartwell Studios was captured, Thomas Patterson confronted the specters of the law. Suspicions of federal import irregularities cast a long shadow over the Beacon Street mansion. Amidst the tempest of collapse, the family still chose to don their most expensive regalia to preserve a flawless image, a desperate attempt to freeze time before total dissolution. This context draped Ellanar Patterson's hand in a haunting new layer of significance. Was the object she gripped in her palm the evidence of a betrayal or the final ember of hope to salvage the family's honor? As Sarah's concentration reached its zenith, a faint voice from the librarian shattered the silence. "Are you tracing the truth behind the Patterson textile scandal?" That question struck like lightning, confirming that the secret Ellanar strove to conceal was not merely a personal ache, but a fragment of a historical seismic shift. Sarah looked up, her eyes ignited with astonishment as the librarian began to unfurl the final chapters of the Patterson lineage. The 1915 conviction for customs fraud was more than a legal document. It was a gavel stroke shattering the pride of Thomas Patterson. Home, career, and social standing all vanished like morning mist. Yet the true specter remained in Ellanar Patterson. She dissolved into the void immediately after the trial, leaving behind whispers of a flight to Canada or a far more agonizing tragedy. The 1914 portrait was no longer a memento. It was a silent witness to a meticulous preparation before the hour of judgment. At the National Archives branch, Sarah delved into the labyrinth of the 1914 to 1915 Patterson case files. The dense stacks of documents revealed a sophisticated web of deceit, undervalued merchandise, bribed port officials, and forged seals of authority. Yet amidst the sterile federal reports, a seismic detail surfaced. Ellanar Patterson was no innocent bystander standing on the periphery. A confidential Treasury memorandum dated March 8, 1914, identified her by name. Ellanar was the custodian of the vital financial records and clandestine correspondence governing the entire illicit import scheme. The truth began to crystallize as Sarah realized the ruthless flow of time. The search warrant for the mansion was authorized for March 16, 1914. Just 1 day prior, on March 15th, the family stood within Hartwell Studios. That portrait was not a moment of bliss. It was a race against destiny. The object Ellanar gripped so tightly in her palm, concealed from the lens, yet desperately preserved, was likely the sole piece of evidence capable of either redeeming or utterly annihilating her family. Amidst the stillness of the photograph, Sarah heard the frantic heartbeat of a woman standing on the edge of the abyss. Ellanar Patterson understood the frigid breath of destiny closing in. March 15, 1914, was not merely a photo session, it was the twilight of an empire. That family portrait served as the final chapter of a gilded life before the federal storm swept away every trace. When agents stormed the mansion on March 16th, they were met only with a hollow silence. Not a single scrap of paper, not a shred of evidence. Sarah realized that the uncanny sterility of the scene was the most eloquent confession Ellanar had remained one step ahead in this lethal game of chess. The image of the dutiful wife began to splinter, yielding to the silhouette of a matriarch reigning from the shadows. Within the folder titled Unrecovered Evidence, Sarah discovered the haunting notes of the lead investigator. Although Ellanar consistently donned the mask of innocence, witness testimonies painted a portrait of a formidable woman present at clandestine cross-border transactions. She was not merely a partner in life. She was the financial architect, the custodian of secrets capable of submerging the entire Boston textile industry. The object Ellanar gripped in her palm while gazing into the camera lens was a defiance against time. It could have been the cipher to a Swiss bank account, a ledger of conspirators, or the transit ticket for her grand escape. She could not bear to destroy it, for it was the final ember of hope for her children, yet she could not leave it within a home destined for seizure. The photograph at Hartwell Studios was the black box of the Patterson lineage, where the truth was sealed in plain sight of the hunters, yet remained forever untouchable. Sarah gathered every fragment of data, her mind besieged by the dark possibilities of what Ellanar Patterson had sealed away on that fateful March afternoon in 1914. The 1915 trial records were more than mere legal documents. They were echoes of an irredeemable collapse. Though on the witness stand, Ellanar donned the mask of a devoted and innocent wife, the forgotten testimony of Margaret Donnelly, the former maid, sketched a different reality. In the mansion's hidden corners, Ellanar was not merely writing letters. She was orchestrating a transcontinental communication network secured within a locked box and only appearing as ashes in the fireplace as the federal storm loomed. The shroud of mystery thickened through the account of neighbor Robert Sinclair. On the eve of the portrait session at Hartwell Studios, beneath the hazy New England moonlight, Ellanar was seen in her garden at midnight. She was not tending to roses. She was performing a ritual of burying secrets into the earth. Was the object she gripped in the photograph a portion of a vast, diverted fortune, or vital evidence she could not bring herself to destroy? Every action was a calculated move in a survival game where the stakes were the freedom of her entire lineage. The most jarring testimony came from Helen Rogers, Catherine's teacher. Immediately after the shackles of the law tightened around Thomas Patterson, Ellanar appeared at the school to collect her daughter. This was no ordinary reunion. It was the genesis of a permanent escape into the void. Her chilling composure in the hour of peril evoked the image of a woman who had prepared for this collapse long ago. The family portrait, the rose garden, and the clenched hand all led to a single conclusion. Ellanar Patterson was never a victim. She was the pilot of the Patterson family's fateful vessel. The testimony of teacher Helen Rogers still echoed like an omen. Ellanar appeared profoundly disoriented, repeatedly murmuring that she must safeguard what mattered most. That was the final instance the figures of the mother and young Catherine graced the light of Boston society. Immediately following Thomas's conviction in April 1915, Ellanar and her children executed a spectacular evasion. They abandoned the Beacon Street mansion with only minimal personal effects, severing every tether to their former world and transforming themselves into specters within the currents of history. The sole fragile trace remaining was the brief appearance of young William Patterson at a school in Burlington, Vermont in May 1915. Yet after a mere fortnight, GU presence dissolved back into the dust. Boston authorities believed this was a voluntary flight to shed the mantle of disgrace and potential criminal charges aimed at Ellanar herself. In the final report of 1915, a singular line confirmed the danger of this woman. Despite her disappearance, she remained a target of federal pursuit due to the unrecovered evidence she possessed the very thing she recklessly traded her honor to protect within her grasp. The fateful turning point reached Sarah not through yellowed parchments, but from the modern digital expanse. After sowing inquiries across genealogy forums, a glimmer of hope sparked from Burlington, Vermont. An email from a woman named Ruth Caldwell caused Sarah's heart to skip a beat. "I believe my grandmother was Catherine Patterson." The portal of time suddenly swung wide, promising to unveil the secret of the mysterious object in the 1914 portrait, the very thing that altered the destiny of an entire lineage and still awaits decoding after over a century of silence. The email from Ruth Caldwell resonated like a requiem from the past. Catherine always insisted on her true name, yet she lived her entire adult life as Carol Caldwell to evade the ghosts of Boston. As Sarah connected with Ruth, a retired teacher bearing the lineage of the child. In the 1914 portrait, a new chapter of truth began to unfold. Amidst the cozy ambiance of Burlington, a small metallic box engraved with the initials EP emerged like a treasure chest of memory where Ellanar Patterson had entrusted the most essence and agonizing fragments of her life. Within the oil-soaked cloth lay the fragments of a forgotten reality, a letter, a miniature photograph, and 3 dossiers bearing the semblance of authoritative documents. Ruth softly shared the sacred vow her grandmother had preserved for 8 decades. She said someone would one day come seeking the truth of what truly transpired. It was more than an exoneration. It was a silent rebellion against prejudice. As Sarah touched the letter, dated March 15, 1914, the very day of the fateful portrait, she felt Ellanar's frantic pulse within each elegant yet hurried stroke. "My dearest Catherine." The letter's preamble resonated through the hushed room, shattering a silence that had endured for over a century. Sarah read Ellanar's words aloud, each term acting as a blade piercing through the mist of deception. The truth finally crystallized. Thomas Patterson was not the architect of crime as the government believed. He was no traitor. He was a shield. Amidst the astonishment of Ruth and Sarah, the portrait of a family crushed by clandestine forces began to sharpen, transforming the object in the mother's hand into the key that liberated a soul imprisoned in injustice. The shocking truth erupted from Ellanar's hurried script. The true architect of the crime, was not the man who bore the Patterson name. Jonathan Harwick, a business associate and a serpent in the shadows, had exploited trust to forge Thomas's signature for 2 long years. He manipulated a labyrinth of corruption from debased port officials to phantom accounts Thomas never knew existed. As justice began to loom, Harwick used the safety of the Patterson family as collateral, coercing a desperate father to accept an exiled fate to safeguard his kin. On March 15, 1914, at the moment the family portrait was frozen for eternity, what Ellanar gripped within her fingers was the key to Safety Deposit Box 247 at the First National Bank of Boston. It was no evidence of guilt. It was the anchor of truth. Knowing federal agents would overturn the mansion, she chose the boldest path, concealing the proof of her husband's innocence in plain sight of the enemy. Her fortitude was a grand patience awaiting the time when Catherine would be mature enough to restore the honor of a father who sacrificed himself for love. Over a century later, Sarah and Ruth returned to Boston together, carrying Ellanar's legacy in the weathered metal box. In the heart of the city, where the memories of the old bank had been merged and preserved over decades, director Jennifer Walsh held her breath while listening to the tale of a century-old injustice. Ruth's tears and Sarah's resolve ignited the final spark in the quest for justice. The secret within the mother's hand that year was no longer an enigma, but a hymn of loyalty and the power of truth transcending the decay of time. Within the bank's subterranean vault, amidst rows of safety deposit boxes cloaked in the dust of ages number 247, stood as a silent witness. As Walsh inserted the key that Ellanar had gripped in her palm in 1914, a soft click resonated. Time itself seemed to suspend. Inside the Pandora's box of truth unfolded letters reeking of bribery, spectral bank records, and most ruthlessly the practice sheets where Jonathan Harwick had perfected his forgery of Thomas Patterson's signature. Each of his pen strokes was a dagger thrust into Thomas's honor, transforming a trusted associate into a scapegoat for a sinful empire. 6 months later, at the Massachusetts Historical Society, Sarah stood before a hushed auditorium to proclaim the restoration of honor for a forgotten soul. The evidence from Box 247 was validated by forensic experts. Thomas Patterson was entirely innocent. He had chosen the darkness of prison as a shield for his kin against the threats of Harwick, who subsequently fled to South America in 1916. Ellanar was no accomplice. She was a silent warrior who utilized an ordinary family portrait to construct an eternal archive of truth. Now, the 1914 portrait from Hartwell Studios has become an immortal icon. It is more than an image of an affluent Boston family. It is a testament to the power of maternal love and the steadfast preservation of justice across generations. Ruth Caldwell smiled through tears as she saw the Patterson name cleansed within the annals of history. The secret clutched within the mother's hand that year finally fulfilled its mission, proving that sometimes the most vital truths are concealed in plain sight, awaiting a heart courageous enough to awaken them and alter history itself. The story of the Patterson family reminds us history is not just what has passed, but what we choose to preserve. If you are moved by Ellanar's fortitude, please like this video and share your thoughts on the power of truth. Don't forget to subscribe to join us in uncovering more dormant historical secrets. Thank you for accompanying us to the end of this journey.